Welcome to the fourth and final episode of a very special series brought to you in partnership with Siemens Digital Industry Software. We started off this series with a focus on digital twins before covering model-based financial optimization, and then we spoke about physics-informed neural networks. Today, for the final episode, we've come full circle. We are talking about a new perspective on capital asset maintenance, basically how visualizing energy data can dramatically help improve their maintenance. To discuss this and a lot more, I'm delighted to welcome back John to the podcast. John Nixon, Vice President of Strategy for Energy, Chemicals and Infrastructure at Siemens, along with two very special guests we have invited for this episode, Gary Sheedy from TeamViewer and Roy Herbert from Verum. Welcome to the Energy Connects podcast, gentlemen. It's so good to have you with us today.
It's a pleasure to join you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, John, let's start by asking you about one of the most fundamental challenges that organizations face, which is a lack of cohesive communication and shared understanding, especially around data. So can you walk us through how data visualization provides a unifying means for improving communication, especially inside large, complex enterprises?
I'm excited to have that conversation. We work visually, and when you look at the complexity and the ever-growing complexity in our industry of energy, chemicals, and infrastructure, and when you look at the next generation that was raised on, Xbox and PS5 and their expectations, visual is the path forward. Visualization, contextualization in a high-fidelity environment is absolutely paramount going forward. If you look back at history, in 2014, we had the bottom fall out of oil and gas. And in 2015, a CEO of a major energy company was interviewed, and he stated, we need to have a manufacturing mindset when it comes to capital projects. Because with this feast and famine environment of energy, when you look at capital projects and their legacy of poor performance, the wasted capital, there is this desire to look elsewhere, like in manufacturing, and say, okay, why is it they continue to improve in their productivity, but we continue to struggle in the field? One aspect of that is visual navigation of complexity. We do that expertly when it comes to automotive manufacture, aerospace manufacture. Let's bring those lessons into the field. So I'm very excited about what TeamViewer has to offer, where when I'm in the field, I'm at the work face, I'm gathering data because I'm performing work. And that work could be as simple as an inspection to as complicated as the actual maintenance, the tear down and the rebuild that we do during turnarounds. And so you need to be able to gather that data and keep that physical reality in sync with the digital twin so that we can rely upon that digital twin. But then what is that digital twin? That digital twin is also in mass and at scale, whether it's the asset, the system of systems, the entire plant. You need to be able to visually navigate that, which is why I love talking to Verum, because Verum does just that, both for brownfield as well as greenfield construction that goes out on the field. You're able to now visually navigate at scale to whatever level of detail you need, because TeamViewer brings to life that work face effort that goes on in the field. In fact, Roy, I'll hand it over to you to kind of talk about, what is it that is so impressive about Verum?
Great. Well, thanks, John. It's interesting. Verum was created really to solve this problem. And 11 years old now in Verum, we are all about, viewing the site in reality. Our VisOps platform, as we say, turns your site reality into a single linkable view in the browser. And think about that. So, this single source of truth now removes all the jargon, right? It lets every role point to the same evidence. You measure it all the same, annotate it the same, agree on the next steps together. So, we always say, let's give everyone the same window into the asset. So engineering layers on design, construction, they'll measure reality. Operation want to pin, the exact piece of equipment and a comment to it. Leadership want to open the same link, right, and make a call on it. And so now there's no more about, which drawing is that again, or which photo am I to be looking at. We cut through all of that, and we have a single visual truth that the whole team can look at and understand.
Yeah, when you say that, we say single source of truth, and I think, it's almost like an authoritative twin, if you will, that governs all the varied disciplines, like you talked about.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We always kind of say a picture beats 10 PDFs. But it's that, there's too much data. Which drawing is the right data? Are we looking at the same data? Is the same data, that CAD drawing that's now overlaid visually, is it, and we all now looking at the same data, we're augmenting the same data. We have deep links to that data. And so it's about having the whole team working visually, which is really a game changer. And then all sharing the same data. We know what data is accurate. We know what data is correct, and looking at together. We do it by roles as well in Verum. So if you're a Verum view, different roles can look at views differently. So it makes it productive for them. You don't have to look at everything at the site. You can look at what you care about, but it's always in context of reality. And you can put comments in Verum as well. These threads, these discussions we have about who's doing what to whom and when are all over the place. Well, now in a single view, a single comment attached to the pump you're talking about. So everybody knows in reality what you're talking about, the same comment that everyone can look at. So it consolidates the discussion, puts it into reality as you're looking at it, and it verifies things. So,
And as you're talking about that data you're talking about, that's gathered with the TeamViewer platform. So Gary, let's talk about gathering that field data.
Absolutely. So, like linking to all of that, it's really fascinating because we talk about single source of truth. So from our perspective at TeamViewer, you've got to create or have the ability to create the content that the field service guy can actually use in the field effectively. So from work instructions, inspections, automatic inspections, and then connect that with the OT environment so you get actually feedback. So one side, you have a single source of truth within, from our perspective, we gather from the PLM. And that design data, we create the content. Then we take that digital twin, which is now visualizable, if that's a word, and you can create it and interact with the real world. So now you're interacting with the OT environment, so you're gathering that data and that feedback as to what's working. Now, what's really interesting here is that when you do that, you're creating a contextual link to the data. So now you're linking the design or the process or the service information with the contextualized environment it's going to be in. Now, the service guy has the information presented to him in a logical manner to carry a task on, to execute a task. And he also then has the ability to be able to make sure that it's connected to what he's actually doing. So he knows it's his service routine related to this component and this part. So from a TeamViewer perspective, what we're seeing is this visualization is enabling companies to save on ordering the wrong parts. Simple as inventory management. It can be as simple as, I've done the right job this time. I executed on the right variant. So therefore, I've done the right repair. So there's the first time fix rate goes up. So things like that they're very simple KPIs, but they mean so much in industry. And more importantly, they stop the effect of errors and rework and stuff that would be required should those ever be made when you're working off paper or you're trying to make a phone call or you're trying to interact with somebody in a different part of the world. These are the absolute values of being able to visualize the content. And more importantly, it's all recorded, right? So now Verum can actually see what it is. They can see how see where it happened. Management can see how it happened. But more importantly, we can now link to this was an error we had. This error was managed, and this was the fix for it. So when that error pops up again, we now have a database of potential fixes for that environment so that the technician has a more contextual database of solutions to draw from.
That's a great point, Gary. And just taking that forward, when you talk about that contextualization, especially across the workforce, now how do you see, and then John, this goes back to you, and how do you see that data visualization being especially effective for part of the segment of employees that are new or are young? How does it relate to them?
Well, I mean, when you bring in, let's say, a young engineer who's just graduated, the first thing you're going to tell her to do is go to the field, right? You're going to send her out there because you learn by doing, and you're going to start inspections and tests. You're going to start building up your knowledge base. But the challenge is the workforce that we are able to tap into is becoming more, it's a tougher marketplace to find the right talent. And when you find that talent, you've got to be able to ramp them up quickly to be safe, reliable, and effective. And you do that visually. Because when I sit here and I talk about the heat exchanger in this part of the plant, well, which one are you talking about? What part of the plant? I mean, you get a lot of questions that in the past, you had to go out there and you had to really kind of, skin your knees and just, get out there and work and it took a lot of labor to get up to speed. The challenge in that environment is we don't have the time like we used to, right? We've got to move much more rapidly. We need that engineer, right? That construction manager on our shoulder, that maintenance supervisor, that coach on our shoulder. And you do that with not just augmented reality, but what I have, when I've talked to TeamViewer, really a good term for it is assisted reality, so that you have that kind of knowledge there. And earlier, when I think Gary was talking about getting it right the first time, well, as you're going through and you're performing work and you're learning how to do things better, more effectively, because you have this very dynamic relationship between, this assisted reality in the field, and then, as Verum was talking about, this kind of authoritative twin, this single source of truth that you're starting to stitch together, you create a virtuous cycle of ever improving performance from your personnel in the field. So again, you have new personnel who come in and they've got to get out in the field, but they've got to get ramped up quickly. And then you also have this ability to now, as they're learning their job and as work is being performed by, say, the larger cadre of personnel in the field, you're creating this virtuous cycle of improvement going forward. Gary, this is exactly why, you and I started talking about TeamViewer and Team Center and the partnership and relationship of our firms, because this is that extension of the digital twin into the field and the ability to now empower, let's say, the young workforce that's coming into our very complex world.
Oh, absolutely. And like, it's very interesting when you have digital natives, like the younger workforce. They're used to working on phones, tablets, head-mounted displays, whatever. In fact, they prefer that environment. They're not so comfortable with a phone call and audio information. And then you've got the other problem, of course, is that you have the tribal knowledge that's already in the subject matter experts who are potentially retiring and exiting the industry. So how do you get that knowledge base in an effective manner, repeatable manner, to educate those people? And to your point, those new digital natives, they need that material served up in the form of a TikTok video or a YouTube training. That's normal. So for them to get this material served up to them in front of the object that they're looking at in a manner which is instructive in a video format is excellent. So the assisted reality side of that allows us to be able to capture when the experts are carrying out particular tasks, how they do it. They can give advice verbally. We can transcript that advice. We can turn that into work instructions. We can turn that into information and video and animation aids that we can marry to the digital twin and then preserve it up then to the digital natives for them to learn from and execute in the field. And it's already been proven that that approach, that visualization mechanism, improves knowledge retention. So they actually get it. First time they can say, oh, this is how it works. I understand it now. It's also the fact that it's contextual. You can go back to steps. You don't have to, it's not like a video to rewind. You can go back to, I didn't quite get what I'm supposed to do here. I can go back to that step and replay it on a loop until I get it and understand it. You can then extend that into training programs. So they turn that then into an information which becomes, training material, study material, and then exams. So you can make a SCORM compliant. It fits in LMS. So now you're taking that tribal knowledge, which was siloed, and you're turning it into reusable content through the use of AR and so assisted and augmented reality. So the digital twin mixed with the assisted and delivering it to a digital native for consumption in a manner which he prefers anyway. So to me, it's a marriage of equals, really,
Yeah, I was actually, what I was going to say is, so Gary, thank you for that. And Roy, as Gary's talking about this ability to provide this assisted and augmented reality. To me, when you're, let's say, a new employee or a young person coming in, and as Gary was saying, these digital natives, by your very nature, you were born on the cloud, and you bring this capability of visualizing at scale. And when you're bringing in that next generation of technicians, welders, pipe fitters, or engineers, foremen, construction managers, whatever the role, they're all digital natives. They all have this expectation to be able to view at scale this entire digital twin. Maybe you can talk about that.
No, absolutely. And some great points, John. We love this use case, the new worker. And we always think about Verum as being an interactive browser-based classroom. And you don't want to send them to the classroom and then put them into the field. So in fact, you're seeing the field live, and the field, the Verum digital twin becomes a classroom. And so that helps, it helps onboarding, it helps upskilling faster, and it makes the whole process stickier. These new younger employees, they want to learn by seeing and doing. And so it allows them to, be in the field without going to the field, and seeing what they need to learn how to do. So we've kind of got these 5 big points around, how visualization helps new younger talent. So it's instant context. We always say you lower the cognitive load of you get your head around what the plant actually looks like without having to go there. And so you quickly get up speed. You're hands-on without the hazard, as I always like to say. So, without putting new people at risk and all the safety and things you have to go through to get certified to be on site with your helmet, as to be on site, you can go through the walk downs and the measurements and all the procedures virtually. It's self-serve. It's shared visual language is the other thing we like, because, when you're new, engineering, construction, operations, you point to the same object. And so there's no jargon barrier, because now you're actually all looking at the same thing together, and it's faster mentorship. So as Gary mentioned, we've got talented workforce out there that understand, and it allows the seniors to hand it out and bring in their expertise to young new employees. So great use case for Verum.
That's a fantastic use case that you spoke about, Roy. Moving forward, how do you think data visualization can actually help companies with asset maintenance and the changes that they're making, for example, to the equipment?
Again, if you look at asset maintenance, right, and you look at, in fact, I like that term you just used, Roy, about cognitive load. So, if you think about all the different variables, all the parameters you have to consider when it comes to asset maintenance and the entire life cycle, I look at it as driving to operational excellence. So if you've got the full life cycle, you have the ability to view it in context, thanks to Verum. And then we've got the data from the last inspections or the whole series of inspections, the last time it was maintained, all that work, Gary, that was performed in the field. I now, in asset maintenance, can get to this, that promised land that we always have talked about having true prescriptive maintenance, anticipating where we're going to have issues. So, for example, I start to see things like corrosion propagation, right? I've observed that. I've gone out with my TeamViewer platform. I've been able to observe it. I've been able to note it in detail. I've updated the digital twin. And now, thanks to my ability to visualize it in context, I can see where there might be hotspots for corrosion, right? Thanks to Verum. And then I add to that, a knowledge graph. I add to that a physics-informed digital twin capability to now look at, well, how rapidly is it progressing relative, say, to corrosion elsewhere in the plant? What does that do to my mean time to failure? How do I need to incorporate this into my next turnaround or the one after? Or is it something I've got to mitigate now? And so there's a lot of challenges when we think about asset maintenance that, thanks to the marriage that we've created here between TeamViewer, Verum, and Siemens, really does bring to life this very powerful platform for asset maintenance. Gary, I'll let you speak to that.
Sure. So, listen, the answer to the question is, can you afford not to, really? Because ultimately, you've now got tools where you can take real world. So to use the corrosion example, you can see that pattern over time as it develops. You're constantly gathering real world feedback on it. That can be photographs. We use things like AI photogrammetry, etc., to determine patterns. So you can now detect those patterns, and you can have that pattern propagation timed. So you can see, well, our time to failure is likely to be this, but you're no longer guessing anymore. You're now building it on data. It's this data-driven decision making you're getting to. Also, if you detect issues in the field, you're now able to feed that straight back into the design process. So now you can go and update your whole design process to provide relevant contextual information to fix it or take remedial action in the field, right? The other side of this is that this mirror or mixing of AI tool suites or the machine-to-machine communication mechanisms, they allow us now to be able to sort and validate pieces of information in an effective manner live as well and contextually. So for example, in an environment where you've detected a problem, you can now go back and see historically, what did we do to fix this? You can now go back, you can say, right, in the past, what was the likelihood of something occurring, or what was the effect of this, right? But more importantly, by detecting it in the first place, you can now go back through that process and you can figure out, what's the cause? How can I fix that cause? What do I need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future? What can I do to avoid that corrosion happening, right? Because now I've detected not only that it happens, I probably knew that before, but I didn't know the rate, I didn't know where the source was. I wasn't able to build a picture around that. And the fact that we have an overview of the plant, which shows us the systems interoperating, so you have these emergent effects which cause things like corrosion and environmental impacts, and you have this design-driven information which allows you to interact with the real world based on what should be happening, you're able to create a map of deviations. And that gives you so much power when it comes to, first of all, fixing it. Second of all, then creating a database of fixes that work, and then speeding up that process going forward. But more importantly, taking remedial action to fix the cause in the first place.
And Roy, what excites me is as we go through and we're planning for turnarounds, shutdowns, and outages and that kind of thing, you do really need a macro view. So where TeamViewer has just talked about this ability again to project into the field, and this ability to continuously improve. When I hear about asset maintenance, the first thing I think of is these large efforts, these large maintenance projects, and the ability you now bring at, say, the macro level to be able to do really contextualized planning.
Yeah, no, absolutely, John. Our founder, Scott Bevish, was an engineer in the field for 25 years. So frustrated with the shutdown turnaround projects and the manual effort that it went through. So there's got to be a better way. And so Scott, left that role to start Verum to really solve, this fundamental use case. What Scott always likes to say, let's all just work off the same evidence and let's that evidence be reality. We can compare it to what we plan to build, but let's now compare that to what actually is there, and let's do it visually. And so the power of those things coming together is great. We use the term in Verum, let's see the truth before you roll the truck. And so the reality of just planning ahead of time, doing your inspections, overlaying your CAD on what you thought you had, comparing it to actual, taking verified measurements, doing all those things without having to be on field, just empowers a team to be ready when you're there, more productive when you show up, less trips to the field, and the field workers are ready when they go. The other comment, let's prioritize with evidence, not opinion. And so, this is short by 238 millimeters is a different comment than it looks off. And so the tongue, it doesn't look right. I don't think it's straight. We change all of that discussion around. We know exactly what's wrong, exactly what to expect when we go to the field.
Yeah,
So,
I like that statement. Let's know the truth before we roll the trucks. I like that.
yeah. So great use case. Maintenance, operations, shutdown, turnaround use cases are really Verum, the heart of the Verum use cases and why we exist. Yeah.
That's evidence, not opinion. That's a great comment as well, Roy. And going back to you, John. So for those who are not so familiar, when you're using data visualization to inform any changes to equipment or maintenance. So how does that work with digital twin? I know you touched on this earlier, but if we can just dive deeper into this topic.
Well, and this gets into, layering, say, like time series health data, alarms, maintenance backlogs, and you do this all in the equipment's 3D context. So you're really looking at, from condition to decision, if you will, going forward. So it, visualization turns maintenance from what I would call reactive firefighting into predictive and planned work. And when sensor signals and work history and engineering limits all show up on an asset's digital twin, you can see degradation trends, right? Like I talked about earlier with corrosion, simulating the impact of different, let's say, mitigations, different fixes. And like what was just said, know the truth before you roll the trucks to be able to do the right work at the right time. Roy, thoughts on that?
Yeah, and then the opening comment is, is your information updated in the digital twin? One of the powers of Verum is we have reality, and then we have the history, and you keep it all. And so as a plant does a shutdown and it does a turnaround, not only do you now you see reality of what's there, you can go back and go, what did this look like yesterday? What did it look like last week? What did it look like a couple weeks ago? And so, it is constantly being updated. And then, of course, because we connect to systems of record like Team Center, which then you bring that in live, you bring that in real time. And so you're looking at real-time data connected to real-time backend systems with a reality view of what's current. You don't lose the history of the past as well. So it gives planners all kinds of the ability to look at what I've got now. How is the project going? How did it go? Did something go wrong? You can go back and recreate that as well. So a powerful set of capabilities when you can work visually.
Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it speaks to this whole, the engineer in me is that whole continuous improvement. How do you make it better? How do you constantly improve what you're doing? And, Roy mentioned the planner record, like in Team Center. So for example, you have all this design information, all this process information available, which you're now able to continuously update. So if you go through that process, you go into the design side, you update your CAD, that updates your bill of materials, maybe you're in service environments, so you're updating your SBOM, for example. You then update your plans, your service planner. From there, then you take that and you alter the content, make sure it's correct, and then you take that into the field and you visualize it through TeamViewer tools and integrate with what's available with any execution environments, ERP, whatever it is you're using out there to manage it. More importantly, when you then launch the applications like an inspection or service or repair or whatever it is you're doing, you're now able to interact directly with the supporting information like inventory, like the process information. You're now able to take all of that and give it to the guy who's actually got to do the job, so he can get it done while they're on site. He doesn't have to leave, check for information, come back again. And more importantly, if he finds an issue, he just logs it, it gets recorded and goes back into that process so that the next time it comes up, it's fixed in the system and the digital twin is a correct and validated form record, basically, that they can use. So that whole continuous improvement process is now possible, and you're now merging that design and theoretical environment and planning environment with the real world. And now they're getting closer and closer and closer. So it's in my opinion, without these tools, you're going to have real problems in making sure that people are trained correctly to be able to use them in the first place, or to do the jobs correctly in the first place. Competitive advantage is going to be an issue because companies who do use it get first-time fix rates are up, the mean time between failures are understood, their inventory is managed correctly, there's less error. All of that starts to become the norm. So, it becomes something that you have to start using. And you need that planner record, the Team Center environment, the process information, the planning to be done correctly, but with the feedback from the field, so that everything is real. It's not just a theoretical, oh, that's a nice idea.
Excellent point there. Thank you, Gary and John. Serendipity there. I think we end this episode of the podcast with a focus on digital twin. We started this whole series in the first episode with a focus on digital twins and then moved to financial optimization, model-based optimization, and spoke about physics-informed neural networks. Your takeaway for the whole series?
So, this has been a journey. It's been a journey from looking at what is a digital twin? What does it mean to us financially? How does that drive optimization financially for, my entire enterprise? Then we started to really dive into the physics enablement of it. When you say digital twin, it truly is a mimic of the world that we live in. And so then when you consider that physics enabled world, the data behind it that you're applying these physics to, well, that data is gathered not only from historians and sensor data and so forth, but with our partner TeamViewer's, platform, as we bring in, the human element, right? The field element to it. And then you've got to be able to put it all into a contextualized environment. And that's why Verum is here. So this journey has led us, as has my career, as has my work at Siemens, to the partnering that we're seeing now evolve and rapidly provide value to our customers, where Siemens, Verum, and TeamViewer are working together.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you, Roy and Gary, for your excellent insights. This has been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for joining the Energy Connects podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and I hope you really enjoyed this episode. We have come to the end of this very special series brought to you in partnership with Siemens Digital Industry Software, but certainly not the conversation. You can join the conversation at energyconnects.com, where you can find more podcast episodes and comprehensive coverage of the energy industry. I'll be back with more podcast episodes from Energy Connects. Until then, goodbye.